In the Parsha this week, there's a very small section referring to Shabbat. It's rather dramatic, and it's about the dire consequences of not following the Shabbat. So it triggered in me a number of thoughts that have been going through my mind for the past year or so or more, some of which I've spoken about here before, but I just wanted to talk about some of these ideas again. So in order to begin, I'll say Good Shabbos. Now, I'm saying Good Shabbos because I want to make sure that everybody here knows that Good Shabbos is the traditional Yiddish way of greeting somebody on Shabbat, and I have a very clear sense that it's disappearing from the horizon. Since Yiddish has been fading over the past 75 years, it's been replaced by Shabbat Shalom, which is a little different. And there's a little, with Good Shabbos, there's maybe a little bit of a kvetch, there's a little bit of something in it, there's a little bit of emotion of a different Eastern European, North American Yiddish tam. And Shabbat Shalom is very cut and dry, modern Israeli, modern Hebrew. But I thought, well, I should say Good Shabbos because I think it's a good Shabbos. And that's what it means. It just means have a good day. Anyway, as many of you come here know that I can usually be found here on Shabbat morning. And I have thought over the years why this is, and I have a fairly good idea. I started coming 35 years ago on a regular basis when Rabbi Bregman came to town, and at that time I was living a very intense, busy life with work and I had a large family at that time. I'd remarried and had a huge family, in fact, for me. And I needed a place. I realized that I just needed a place to come. I mean, we call this place a sanctuary, and that's basically what it was and what it is for me. It's a place to come. It's a retreat. And I found over the years that this worked for me. No one would disturb me here. And other things happened as things went along. I've talked to Naomi before about how the singing is something which was awakened in me. I didn't know I could sing until I started coming here and the songs and everything. So it sort of continued to build with me. And then I got interested in about 20 years ago with the Torah study. And so that's been another element of why I'm drawn kind of magnetically to this place on a Shabbat morning. And when I don't come, I can tell you I really notice it. It's actually an effort for me not to come. So I know that there's some vortex, something going on here that's good for me. But I was thinking about Shabbat also recently when I was asked to participate in a seminar program at the Fraser Valley University, and the woman who was running the program, a very odd topic, which I think I also talked about a few months ago, an odd topic called the geography of religion. And she actually turns out to be a geographer, a social geographer, but she wanted to put elements of religion into it. She wanted to really scope out for her students, who are senior students, undergrads, about how various religions identify their holy places. How have they spread out around the world, and what do they use on a regular basis for holy places? And so she said, will you come and talk about Judaism? And I said, anyway, first actually, Rabbi Dan was invited to go there, but he couldn't go. So he said, maybe you'll find this interesting, and you can. She also wanted to do some environmental stuff, so I said, okay, I can throw that in. That'll be fine. But when I started to think about holy places in Judaism, I couldn't figure out how I was going to fill up 3 hours of seminar talk there. So I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, well, we had the temple in Jerusalem, which we really don't have now, and people go there and they make a deal about it, and they believe that there's some holiness around there, but people more or less make their holy places in their homes and so on. And somehow or other, my mind got around to this and I said to her, we don't really have so much holy places as we have holy times. We have holy events. And she said, well, that's fine. Why don't you talk about that? Because she'd already had the Muslims there, the Christians there, the Baha'is there, the Sikhs there. And she said, nobody's talked about that. Everybody's, showing us pictures of their temples and this and that and the other thing. But she said, this would be an interesting thing to talk about. So I did. I talked about that really in Jewish liturgy, in Jewish thought, we find our sanctuaries, our holy places, I guess it's sort of in our own minds in a sense, but also in the times. And it goes back really to the Bible, to the early parts of Genesis, in that the world was created. Yes, there were things created, but everything was created in a day or in a week, in time. When you look at Genesis, it's by Yom HaRishon, by Yom HaShishi, by Yom HaShini, everything is done by the day. And then, of course, we come to Shabbat. And no thing is done then. No thing is created. And turns out to be the most important time of the week, when no thing is created. So it's the time, it's not the place. And it's also portable. It makes it very accessible to wherever we are. So, honestly, I really like this place, but I wouldn't be stuck. And I've gone to other shuls on Shabbat. And that's refreshing to know, too. Or I can do a Shabbat service in my own heart and my own head by myself. But it's Shabbat. So So I would ask you to think about the idea of what it means to you, because at the end of this, I would like to hear from some of you anyway what this idea has meant, either as a child, what you thought about Shabbat, what you're thinking of now as you're getting older, because I want to know more about it. I want to explore it more. So I've run across some other things that have led me along this path. I was very surprised, because I know about this fellow, Oliver Sacks. I was very surprised to read a year ago in the New York Times, as he was dying, he wrote some very interesting pieces as he was dying, including his memoir, which I had read, and I knew that he was not a practicing Jew, although he had come from an Orthodox family in England. And there he is, writing a treatise on his deathbed, and it's entitled Shabbat. And I just want to read to you the last paragraph. He said, "Now, weak, short of breath, my once firm muscles melted away by cancer, I find my thoughts increasingly not on the supernatural or spiritual, but on what is meant by living a good and worthwhile life, achieving a sense of peace within myself. And I find my thoughts drifting to the Shabbat, the day of rest, the seventh day of the week, and perhaps the seventh day of one's life as well, when one can feel that one's work is done and one may in good conscience rest." So that got me thinking again about the business about rest. And I was reminded then that I had read a book many years ago called The Sabbath by Rabbi Joshua Heschel, who was a very well-known and I think respected Jewish cleric in the mid-20th century. He had been raised in an Orthodox family in Europe, but when he came to North America, he taught and worked both in the Hebrew Union College, the Reform congregation, and then latterly in the conservative congregations, Jewish Theological Seminary in New York as a teacher. And Heschel has a particular slant on this book, and I'll just very briefly try and give it to you and see what you think about it. He points out that for most of human history, the conquest of space, that is, things in space, has been the most prominent feature of human life. When we look at history, we read history, and it's all about conquests and building things and revolutions and stuff like that. And he wonders whether this is, in part, a reaction to a fear about contemplating time. Again, within what we know in 20th century physics, there now seems to be quite a considerable sense that you can't observe the universe as a physical entity in space without incorporating the time factor. So it's now called space-time. When you look through a telescope, you're not supposed to be just looking at a rock. You're supposed to be contemplating, in a sense, what's happening all around it, how did the rock get there, what's going on. There's time, there's a time factor going on. In fact, we talk about light years, time. So we don't measure things anymore. If you're doing theoretical physics or astronomy, you're not just looking at a yard, an inch, a meter. So there's something even happening in the physical sciences which is driving us back to looking at this concept of what time is. We all talk about how time flies. What do we mean by this? Can we put a grip on time at all? I mean, we can put a grip on this. This is a thing, but can we hold on to time? Is there anything we could do with time? What do we do with time? And I think that as one ages, or one, like Oliver Sacks, becomes ill, one starts to think about time in a different way even than you did when you were younger. Time seems to move so quickly, let me tell you. When you're young, so how can time move at different speeds? But it does. Ask anybody. However, we don't have either the will or the vocabulary to talk much about time. But Shabbat forces us to think about time, because that's what it's about. It's a day. It's a day to celebrate and to think. So there are some biblical hints about time. As I said, the creation is all in days. The description of the Shabbat in Genesis is that God rested, delighted, and also hallowed the day. And this is the first time that the word kadosh is used in the Bible. Sabbath, Shabbat, is kadosh. Other things become kadosh, but Shabbat right from the beginning is holy. There's another word in Hebrew that's used, but I don't think it's in the Bible, but it's used. It's called menuha, which doesn't mean just simple rest, but it means tranquility and peace, and this is a description of the experience of Shabbat. In the Ten Commandments, no things are mentioned, but Shabbat is mentioned, a time. It's time. So there are some specific features about the observance of Shabbat also in the Bible. There's some legal and social guidelines as to how you're supposed to experience Shabbat, but a few of the things that you're not supposed to do is you're not supposed to use tools that reflect toil. You're not to light a fire because a fire represents anger. You're not supposed to say the penitent blessings in the Shemona Esrei, in the Amidah. If you notice in the Shabbat morning service, we omit all of the Shemona, all of the 18, 19 so-called blessings, which are really requests. And they're requests because we recognize grief We're asking for things because we need to ask for them, but on Shabbat we don't, because we don't want to be reminded of grief. And one of the other things that Heschel spends a lot of time talking about is the visualization, conceptualization of Shabbat as a bride for Israel. So on Kabbalat Shabbat, in the introduction on Friday night, we sing Lecha Dodi, you are my beloved. We get up from the table when we're singing this, face the east, and welcome the bride in. So Shabbat is treated Shabbat is treated like a bride in this sense, however you want to think about a bride, and what if Israel is a people, is a conceptual people, and the Shabbat is the bride, you can decide how you feel you should relate and honor and deal with them. And in fact, we should have a covenant where we talk about our relationship, which is kadosh. And in the bridal vows, it's mekadosh li, as I bring you wholly to myself. So Heschel is suggesting that when we're aware of time, and Shabbat forces us to be allowed time, it allows us to see the value of the insight of a single moment. Now, there are other ways that people try to get those insights, through meditation, through prayer, and so forth. But Shabbat is an opportunity. It's a time to focus and to enable us to achieve this kind of state where not only is it a moment of insight, the aha, the inspiration of something special happening to us. He also feels that this time that we take, these moments, give us sort of a peek into eternity. He feels, I guess in his theology, that one of the things that human beings are most interested in is what happens to us after our corporeal lives here. What else is there in life and in the universe? And he calls this eternity, or olam haba'ah. And that by exercising our concentration, our time during Shabbat, we can start to get a taste of what eternity is like, and also start to develop, if you will, some tools to take with us when we're faced and have the opportunity to go there. So he views eternity as an eternal Shabbat. That's his conclusion. So that's what I have to say about Shabbat, what I've been thinking about. So I'd like to ask if anybody here has any other thoughts about the Shabbat, any other experiences that they've had. I think it would be nice for us to hear about that.
It's
because you have to come and do some work here on our behalf. Do you get an opportunity to feel Shabbat along with what you do? I know sometimes when I'm leading services in Minyan or something like that, like it's very hard to actually pray because you're worried about keeping the pace of the service going and you're doing various things. And so I'm wondering, as you're up here every week, and you should